Okay, we are streaming.
All right. It is 4:32 p.m. Wednesday, June 18th. We'll call this meeting to order. I acknowledge with respect that we are in Robinson Huron Treaty Territory and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and known as Wadding. Wadding is the home of Garden River First Nation, Batchelana First Nation, and the historic Sault Ste. Marie Métis Council. The next item on our agenda is adoption of our minutes from our last meeting. Looking for someone to move into second adoption of those minutes. Anyone? Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Miranda. Any additions, deletions, changes to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of those minutes? That is carried. Thank you very much.
Since I wasn't here.
Sure, okay. Anyone with a declaration of pecuniary interest on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the adoption of today's agenda. So could I have someone to move into second our agenda for today? Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Miranda. Any additions or changes to the agenda? No, we determined that the one item you were concerned about was indeed there. All in favor of approval of today's agenda as provided, and that is, you ready with that, Sean? That is carried. All right, moving on. Okay, so we've got a few items here under business arising. And the first one is public art for a bus route, and Alicia is going to give us a little bit of background, and then because I don't believe this is in the agenda.
This is not me.
This is not in the agenda. So for clarity, everyone, and I don't know if you want to send it to them now or so for the next, I believe it's the next three items. The bus wrap, the graffiti walls, and the Sioux Market building. So the details of those agenda items are not yet in the package. And you would have to add them subsequently from a public perspective. And Alicia has just sent those to you. So if you could all just take a minute and find that email, hopefully you can do that. Sean, here we have in the room actual physical copies of these. So we're doing the bus wrap first. And the graffiti, and then this one here.
Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, so let's 5.1, Alicia, let's do this.
Sure. So it's been suggested that to add to our public art collection, in consultation with our Indigenous policy advisor, that we pursue the acquisition of a public art bus wrap as designed by an Indigenous artist. I put together a timeline, some costs associated with this, and a proposal request to you today to look at this with respect to our public art funds that we have available. I was able to determine that we have $95,250 currently in our public art fund, with an additional $40,000 for this year's allocation. So there is a cap. I don't actually know what that cap is. I wasn't able to get that information. So at some point, if we don't spend, we will lose a little bit. But either way, there's not a major risk of that specifically today. So there's no impetus to make a decision in this moment. So looking at, if you're able to look at your documents, if you have them, I hope you do. But at this point, we've been looking for a request here today. With your approval, it would go to council at the end of July. We could do potentially a call for artists in early September. I'm trying to make sure that whatever our determination is with our ACAP timeline, that we're not overlapping and hitting each other too much to try and tax the committee rather. We'd be looking at expression of interest applications in early October. Shortlisted applicants would be notified by mid-October. We would be looking to pay up to 2 artists $1,000 each, plus HST for their shortlisted proposals. Those proposals would go to a review committee comprised of members of the Cultural Vitality Committee, Indigenous stakeholders in the community, and a number of city staff, and ensure that the onus was making sure that we consult properly with our Indigenous friends. in partners in this. And so looking at this, we're looking at the artwork to do that to be developed in late January through early March, with the artwork files to be finalized by late March. Production could happen April to May of 2026 in time for National Indigenous Peoples Month in June. I would not wrap a bus in January. So we could make this faster, but I don't think that there's any real benefit to that, to making this happen so that it lands in the winter months. I've built in fees for ongoing maintenance, because I expect there will be some maintenance required. In terms of the panels themselves, I was going to work with the manager of transit to determine which parts of the bus get damaged the most often, potentially not to say not wrapping those, but making it very easy to replicate, and to buy in advance perhaps. So again, if we're talking about a bumper area in particular, then bumper getting damaged at some point, we'd have the replacement ready to go without additional cost if you have basically foreseen. Looking at the second page of this document, we need them. I'm going to start building things in like advertising and promotion as we do calls for artists. So that's helpful. Ultimately, the shortlist applicant fee, again, $2,000. The artist fee, we can discuss this for sure. I've currently placed it at $7,000. And my experience in working with members of the Indigenous artist community over the past year has been, you have to make it a valuable project for them to pay their, as professional artists to pay their attention to. So we need to make sure if we're going to bring somebody in at a professional level that we pay them appropriately. Beyond that, the bus route itself for a 40-foot bus is $12,995 plus HST. Again, I built in $3,000 for maintenance and a small contingency of $1,700, which brings us to $27,012, but a round number of $27,000 would be the request.
Okay, so just one further thing, are you able to either direct me to, because I haven't found it here, I know that you had pulled up in preparation for this, the public art, I don't know if it's the policy or the definition of the city of Sault Ste. Marie's public art. I just want to bring that to everyone's attention as we go about discussing this. So you'll see there, Alicia has shared that public art is defined as art in any medium that is situated in a public space, might be temporary or permanent, plays a role in beautifying the community, engaging residents, and creating a sense of place, creating links to economic growth and strengthening tourism. Can be placed, installed, and created anywhere in or on city-owned buildings and spaces in Sault Ste. Marie. We'll just leave that, well, no, because I won't be able to see everybody. So public spaces are those frequented by the general public and are owned or leased by the city. They may include parks, trails, roads, open spaces, courtyards, bridges, tunnels, boulevards, building exteriors, and publicly accessible interior areas of municipal buildings. And then there's some information there on the artist and the creation by an artist. So with those things in mind, would anyone care to weigh in on this idea? What do you think? Shall we go around the table? Nyla, please. I see your hand. Are you able, excuse me, Nyla, 1 second. Are you able to make them bigger? Like to change the so it's a gallery or whatever, just to like, if you go to, I don't know where. But go ahead, Nyla. I can't see everybody quite so well.
Sure, yeah. I was just wondering, and sorry if I missed it. I'm catching up on the timeline. Is there like an anticipated length of time that the bus would be wrapped for? I know we're talking about maintenance. So are we looking like for, I have no idea, a year, 6 months? Do we know how long it'll be on the bus?
We don't know how long it'll be on the bus, but because it's a city-owned asset, for as long as it's reasonable to have it, it would be there. So I would hope the answer is years. I don't know the exact answer to that, but I'm happy to research that information and get back to you.
Any other questions, Nyla, or let's do questions first and okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll just because then I'll mute myself. Sorry, Miranda, not to jump in just so I can get them out and then turn on bouncing back and forth. My only other question, and like maybe I don't know if you could even speak to this at this time, because I know that you just said it'd be maybe on the bus for a long going time. Is there any anticipation that this would be the wraps on the bus, but that like more wraps, like it's a different artist in like a year or 2 years, or that there's a long-term plan for, obviously there's like advertising on some of the buses that are a revenue source, or is like these are the buses and these are the artists ongoing, or is it a new space where people are applying every year or 2 years to have their art featured? And that'll be, I think, my final question. So I'm gonna mute myself and let the next people ask afterwards.
This time, we don't have a plan for continuous art to be cycled on or off buses. To be a relatively new initiative. As you mentioned, it is typically part of an advertising process. But we do have city buses that are wrapped, I guess, in city insignia. And my guess is it'd be on one of those buses that was due for renewal. I don't have an idea as to which bus it would be, or how long, or rather which route it would take, or if those routes switch. But again, I'd be happy to find out that information as well.
Thanks, Nyla. Miranda.
Thank you. The only question I have relates to fees and royalties. So I heard you say, Alicia, that the fee that's in this budget is based on past experience working with artists for large briefs like this. I'm wondering if it's connected at all or informed by the CARFAC fee schedule or by another professional fee schedule. I'm also wondering if it includes the payment of royalties, which in this case would be linked to the amount of time that the image, that the art is on the bus. So the time frame is an important piece. And thank you, Nyla, for bringing that up and jogging my memory about that. But yeah, questions about where the fee is coming from and if it includes royalties.
So the fee is really negotiable, certainly, and it's as added in at this point as to what would be a feasible amount to pay, adjusting the budget where we would need to make sense. So it's not informed by CARFAC, does not mean that it should not be, it should absolutely be. But the reality is that ultimately it's the final number that you see is about 27,000 based on this schedule. I don't know that this goes down any further from here at this point. So I want that to be the conversation. But ultimately, I'm sorry, the second part of your question was royalties. So in terms of royalties, I'd have to work with legal on that until I kind of have permission from this group to go ahead and do that and explore those options. I don't have a fee schedule in mind. That might mean amending it. It would cost more money. I would hope that we would look to, and again, forgive me, I don't have the exact terminology on this, but I think that we'd be looking to buy it versus licensing it, and to own it and have those royalties so that we wouldn't pay copyright in perpetuity. If that makes sense. And which also makes that number low, in my opinion.
Okay, anything else, Miranda?
No, just also to note that the CARFAC schedule has additional information about some of these other questions. So just encourage, in terms of figuring out the budget, to check that out.
Thank you. Sean?
I'm just curious, is there a rationale for why it was specifically a bus wrap as opposed to anything else?
No, I have not been provided that information.
Is that something we can get?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
Do you have other questions?
that's it.
Counselor Spina, any questions or anyone? No, you're good? Okay. So I don't have any questions, but I do have comments. Would anyone, before I make mine, would anyone care to make a comment? Go ahead, Nyla.
Just on the note about kind of building off what Sean said about the bus, I do like the idea of a bus. I like that maybe it'd be seen in areas where we don't have public art, like whatever the routes are, especially I would think if it's on it for a year, that bus, I don't want to say, I don't know about transit, but I don't think the buses are necessarily like on a route. So I think the idea that a bus would be going to certain areas where there, are no venues for public art would be interesting for the people like living and working in those areas. So that's my only comment.
Okay. Do you have a comment? No? Okay, so I will provide mine. So I do appreciate that this reminder of public art and the fees and the funds that we do currently have available. and how our fund is structured in terms of its annual contribution from the city's budget. This is a good reminder for me, for sure. And I'm sure for all of us. So what I see when I look at this is that we currently have $90,000 in our budget. There would be a $40,000 contribution from 2025, which would take that to $130,000. If we were to look at 2026, assuming that this is correct, Alicia, that there would be another $40,000 to go into the fund in 2026. So that would put, by next year, $170,000 into this public art fund, okay, which is a significant amount of money. If we go back to our cultural vitality plan, it was identified there, and I'm sure we all are very much aware that we are bereft and devoid of public art in Sault Ste. Marie. We have very, very, very little that the city has made investments in over the years. There's a couple of pieces on the waterfront and perhaps a couple of pieces in other places. I know that there's lots of murals happening now in the city, and I think there's something that would be by the definition of public art in the Northern Community Center perhaps, I'm not sure about John Rose, or if John Rose is in process or whatever. So there are some things, but I think that making a decision like this in absence of a bigger plan that we now have the opportunity to create with $170,000, when we have so many opportunities to honor our Indigenous history and to really make, somebody mentioned, what's the long-term plan? What's the rationale for this as a choice, okay? And call it $27,000 of 130 or 170. I mean, it's a significant amount of money, and it doesn't seem to be. I think that we have an opportunity now, because we've accumulated some funds, to step back and say, how could we actually spend all of this money and do something significant that would, going back to the definition, be attractive to tourists, represent our history, and in particular our Indigenous history, contribute to economic growth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the concept of broadening and including Indigenous art and art in general in our public art plan is fantastic. I love it. I just think that we need a bigger plan here, and we need to figure out what could make sense in terms of this next upcoming year, and how we could take what is a very, very little public art and really do something significant with it. By thinking together as a group, by including our Indigenous policy advisor and other people, and doing something significant instead of using this money for something that, while the image would be something we would have based on the plan, the way of sharing it has a shelf life, if you will. Those are my comments. So I would not be, I'll just say, in wrapping that up, I am not in favor of approving this at this time. I am in favor of looking at it as a bigger plan, and still working towards the timelines of next year and so on. Those are my comments. Would anyone else care to make a comment? So
I have another thought. You reminded me of a conversation that we had years ago, related to funding that the committee provided for one of the public art installations in the plaza during its construction. I remember at that time, we had a similar conversation. We ultimately ended up approving that proposal, but we did have the conversation about, some members expressed like a sense that it kind of came out of the blue. Others concerned that there wasn't a more transparent process that could be accessed by people that aren't already working within the city, right? And I think that's one of those pieces that's missing about the public art pot of money that we have, in ways that ACAP is really strong in terms of the dispersal of those those funds is as much work as it is to distribute. But in terms of the dissemination of that support for public art, we don't have, I mean, city staff have done an amazing job in terms of reaching out to the community, especially in terms of the mural projects and all of those sorts and the different installations that have occurred most recently. But we still don't have as many this particular pot of funding doesn't have that same engagement access, I think. That we're kind of, I don't know if that would be part and parcel of a larger plan or something to that effect. So and that was something that we expressed concern about back then as well. You know, at the time we sort of said, okay, well, we have to spend this money by this point anyway. Okay. But we're not super happy about it because right now it kind of looks like, and I say looks because this is not
It's okay.
a reflection of you know what happened, but if it's something that is only accessible by recommendation of city staff, which I know that's not the case, but that's how it effectively becomes when we don't have those other mechanisms for being able to have greater engagement in its dissemination. Anyways.
I really appreciate your thoughts because I had a similar conversation with Virginia this morning. So like this is all kind of perfect. So yes. So I also hope that changes. I hope we can, yeah, so.
Does anyone else, so if there's no further comments, I have stated that I'm not willing to support this. Is there anyone that is willing to support this? I'm not seeing anyone who's willing to support this. Make sure I'm not missing out here on something. Okay,
And I
thank
would
you.
just say, like, I'm not saying terrible idea, but
Right.
but it's the context, right? That's sort of up in the air for me. Yeah.
So if it's okay with the
Just one second, I see Nyla there. Nyla?
Sorry, I was hoping to get down there to be with you in the room today, but I've just been kind of stuck here in the office. But I just wanted to add, like, similar, it's also, I don't think it's a horrible idea, and I do think it's going to stay with me in the back of my mind about having art that like travels around the Soo, but that I do really agree with what's been said about having a plan, and I just wanted to add that to what everyone has said so far about this proposal.
Before we pass on this, in a context for this, we're part of a larger plan. And potentially we had funding from another source to help support this, or maybe even half the costs, half of 27,000. Is this something generally that the committee might think about supporting? Or is this something that I should? What are your thoughts? Can I ask that just to?
I would not.
Okay.
I would not. I think the plan is more important right now. But if there's, I'm just one person here. So anyone who, if it costs less, would be willing to move ahead with this as it's outlined here. Nyla?
I would say, like, for me, I am in support of the plan, and if it costs less, but I would just sorry, not the plan, like the proposal, but I would want to see it come like after a plan.
Right.
Just to like clarify, like I am
Exactly,
supportive
yes.
of the thing, but it would be the plan first, same as Donna, but to say that I would, especially obviously if there was like leverage from other sources supporting that initiative.
Okay, so without putting words into anybody's mouth, I'm seeing that no one is in favor of moving ahead as it's described to us here. Alicia, do you feel like with the comments that everyone has shared that you can take that back? We would look forward to participating in further discussion around a plan on how to engage, as Sean mentioned, and how to use, the bulk of the money that we have in a way that represents the policy that and the values. Okay, we're good. All right. Moving on to the next item, which is I've lost my agenda here. The graffiti walls. Yes.
Okay, so what are graffiti walls? Let's have a quick conversation. Graffiti walls promote expression while helping to eliminate unwanted graffiti in communities as they designate safe, visible, and legal spaces for street art to occur. They offer youth and emerging artists a legitimate way to outlet and showcase their talent, and to hone and develop those skills as well. Presence of graffiti has also been known to reduce the incentive to tag unauthorized areas and private property, and ultimately it allows people to work within their desired medium, which sometimes is framing. And so ultimately, it's also likely that people will take pride and respect the boundaries of public spaces if opportunities are provided for this type of expression. So again, these walls, they serve as a powerful tool for community engagement, beautification. They make places that are maybe targeted by vandalism into spaces of creativity. And they help to shift the community's perspective around different types of art, from graffiti to street art versus nuisance art, and reduces cleanup costs and the negative stigma that's often associated with the street art itself. So anticipating outcomes by a project like this, well, actually, I'll talk about the proposal first. At this time, I'd like to propose up to 5 graffiti walls that would be double-sided to be installed at 5 separate city-owned locations or spaces where graffiti is currently considered to be problematic. These locations and spaces would be installed, they would be in consultation with Public Works, with Parks, and with the graffiti committee. And so below you'll see some examples of a 100-foot long wall in Hamilton, Ontario. It seems to be pretty significant success. And then on the second page, some more standalone pieces from the Grimsby Skate Park. These do exist in a number of different cities across Ontario, but I thought these were some notable opportunities to talk about it. So in terms of the considerations about this, ultimately the request for today, just to cut right to it, with the proposed budget is $5,000. Ultimately, we'd be looking again 10 pieces of plywood, some primer paint, solder tubes, concrete mix, pressure treated wooden pegs, boards for framing to protect the outside of the plywood, and then the installation through Public Works would cost about $600, $500 to $600 each. And so that's about $5,000 with a small 13% contingency. It was a smaller amount of money. Ultimately, we'd be looking at placing them in visible spaces to promote a level of safety for the artists and for those who are using them. I suggest that the boards be placed a minimum of 3 feet off the ground to provide a level of visibility for whoever might be standing on the opposite side. Basically, they'll be maintained on an ongoing basis, for example, with damage and propriety, and any other concerns that might also arise. They'd be monitored by Parks and community services staff. We would probably have to post some rules and signage, is my guess. And we could eventually start to catalog some of the works that come out of that with our arts and culture website, adding a QR code to something nearby so you can see the works as they evolve over time. I think that if we start with a plan to paint and reset the canvases twice annually, that's a good perk to start with, basically. So again, spring and maybe closer to middle of summer or fall, when graffiti is kind of at its peak. And some identified locations of issue are the James Street Park, the Esposito Skate Park, the North Street Ball Diamond, and then we'd be looking in consultation with Parks, significant more consultation with Parks and with the graffiti committee for 2 other locations as well.
Okay. Anyone with questions or, I'm sorry, and where do you want this money to come from?
The Public Art Fund,
Okay, so this is
a youth engagement piece.
the same, what we just discussed, that same fund, as we were just talking about for the other, idea. Okay, questions or comments? Nyla?
My only question right now is just, is there anything that's time sensitive about this request? Obviously, just building off what we just talked about maybe funding things after there's more of a cohesive plan. I'm anticipating that like our third agenda item, there is like a kind of a deadline and an urgency to it. Is there anything like time sensitive here that we should be considering if we kind of get into the same conversation about whether a plan comes before approving public art fund spends?
I think this more reflects the graffiti committee, who have not met yet at this time, to be honest. Truthfully, graffiti is an ongoing issue at a number of different city sites, so we as city staff can determine that a mitigating factor needs to be implemented in some way. What that means to be with a solution as approved by the committee, that's great. If it's not, it's at the end of this, if the recommendation is to come back with something else, we will do that as well.
Are you good, Nyla?
I just want to jump ahead of Miranda again. I feel bad we keep putting our hands up at the same time.
Go ahead.
Sorry if this had been part of it, and then I'll ask another revealing question. So sorry, is this coming from the like a task force that is sub of this committee, or it's coming from, sorry,
So-
could you just
So it
confirm?
has not come from the graffiti committee at this time. It's a subcommittee of council that's been formed. Quite a number of leaders across the community have been named as being members of the committee, and also a number of cultural vitality committee members. I think Donna, who's currently sitting on the committee. Truthfully, again, this is more of an issue, a mitigating issue, like versus it's to help with graffiti, but it's also a public youth engagement tool to try and help artists as well. So yes, it helps the graffiti problem potentially. Is it a way for youth to engage? It's a different thing that we're not doing yet. We'll do this committee.
No, yeah, for sure. I guess the question being, and sorry if this was in the answer, but like is this a proposal being suggested by that like committee as it's a solution that they had come up with, or it's just running adjacent to their goals, or this is something that like that subcommittee wanted us to look at and they're looking at this committee for support with funding?
At this time, it's city staff.
Okay,
So
perfect. Thank you.
Miranda?
Thank you. Having spoken to Alicia a couple of times when she's either been on her way out or out and about working on graffiti remediation, I feel like this is a timely project because I know that it is an issue. I also feel like because it's a relatively small ask and with the approaching summer, it's a fun project and a timely project in the sense that there will be youth out and about through the summer who could put these graffiti boards to use. I do, and that makes me more inclined to want to approve this one right away, this project. I do have a question though about whether there will be monitoring done to see if the presence of these boards actually reduces the amount of graffiti in some of these problem spots. And I'm wondering, because I know that there's been graffiti issues in the downtown core, if those areas might be considered as some of these other possible 2 other locations to be confirmed.
that was all great. Sorry, I'm gonna have to get you to repeat part of that, but the quick version is that I think there is significant need for this downtown in particular, in addition to the areas that were outlined here. Those are just some easy places where we have worked with public works staff and park staff to determine that there is an ongoing issue. Often, for example, right now, and I'm gonna say this like knocking wood, Esposito Skate Park, the track hasn't been touched by graffiti, but the building there, the city owned building is covered all the time. And so hopefully it will be nearby and hopefully we could repaint that and the monitoring could take place by park staff in this way. And then in addition to this, in terms of like propriety, what have you, in summertime when we have students, but also when graffiti tends to be the most prolific, we'll have the appropriate support staff to occasionally to be able to go and monitor these spaces. Would it be every day? It would not, but in addition to this, I'm also working on pieces on the side about how to report graffiti that's damaged public art or heritage pieces as well. So I have a form ready to go, but again, we're talking about prepping for a different committee for a different time. But either way, so we're looking to build these mechanisms in together, and like as a larger plan, but have not been.
I see this as being a potentially exciting pilot project. So like I said, I feel supportive of this initiative.
Thanks, Miranda. Sean?
I do. Yeah, I think this is really, really good value for money. Like, it's not a huge ask, and I think it has a potential for really strong impact. My only hesitation is the same thing that I said to the previous one, right? Where I feel like if I apply the same standard to one, I have to apply it to another. And so that makes me hesitant to support it. And the other question is really about the concept of graffiti, especially graffiti remediation initiatives being the purview of this committee, that our financial coffers are what is responsible for paying for what is essentially a diversion program. But now I can see the connection. You know, I'm not saying there's no connection whatsoever, but obviously what makes this relevant to us is the supportive aspect of fostering artist creative outlet. But in terms of the diversion motivation here, I think it would only be fair that at least a portion of that funding come not from us.
From that one. I tend to agree with you, and I also wonder for a couple different reasons. So one of the things as some background for the group, we've talked about graffiti removal. When it tends to happen on public art or public art is damaged, I tend to deal with that myself. And I was telling you that for a reason, but I lost my train of thought.
Well, you predicted another question I forgot about, which was like, are they sending you out to do graffiti?
No, but I don't want to send Public Works to do it at this time. We take a light hand on some of these pieces, and I know what some of the materials were that was in the construction, the type of finishes, and I do have a small budget for mural maintenance, we'll say, and repair annually. But unfortunately, those funds can't touch this. I'm hoping with a small request here today, that in the future, this is something that we can shift over, because there are currently no funds associated with the graffiti committee. So if this is something in the future, I'm not sure if Virginia would ever be able to speak to that, or if she ended up catching her off guard here.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Sorry, I think, I don't know if Alicia let you know, I had to pick up a car rental and I got caught on Great Northern Road. Yeah, no, I think, to Alicia's point, she has a small budget that we use for maintaining the public art pieces and doing graffiti removal on each of those pieces. Public Works takes care of a lot of the graffiti removal in other areas of town, on the sporting buildings, Esposito Park. So it's been a kind of a balanced effort between the two of us. I think the thought was creating these art spaces for youth so that they would be able to participate, especially in the areas where we see a lot of the tagging and the graffiti. It gives them an opportunity to have that outlet and an actual wall that's dedicated to them. Moving forward, we had proposed the 3 locations just because we know those are high areas. And then as we start to get this graffiti committee rolling, looking at what are those other 2 locations as we kind of progress through meetings with that committee. And this kind of ties into that, youth street art. So we thought that there was potentially a fit here.
In addition to this, I want to say that some of the research that I've done research lately, is that there are other places in Ontario that have chosen to do this on buildings. I don't love that. I think it's confusing to people. I don't live, for example, I have not consulted with these people, so I'm not saying this as it's actually happening, but for example, Paint and Decor Concepts on the backside of their building, they are significantly tagged all the time. They've only touched the public art one time. That's on the other side of the building, which is great. But I mean, in theory, I wouldn't want to have that graffiti wall there or working with again, I don't know that I want to work with a private property owner. And I don't know that I want to do this on a permanent structure. In Sudbury, they have an old parking garage. They don't love it. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm saying that I don't know if there's anywhere identifiable like that in Sault Ste. Marie that works. And so I like the idea of these being permanent structures, but ultimately if they're not working or it's worse, we can take it down. We can move on from this as well. What I do see, what I'm hoping for, and this is a big hope at this point again, is that if we pilot it here, this is something that gets taken away from us in future years. I don't think there's much ongoing maintenance required for this. In terms of the paint and what have you, we have lots of paint in places that we can use to maintain these spaces over time. But at the same time, I would love to see this expanded in some way if it made sense for the graffiti committee, but I think that we kind of have to show them as well.
Okay, you're good. Sunny, do you have any questions or comments?
Yep, thanks. Can everyone hear me now?
Yep.
Are we talking about like walls that are going to be painted and then stay there, or are we talking about like you can come and go and spray paint or do whatever you want whenever you want?
So it would be installations of essentially sonotubes and sonotubes, and I guess wood panels and a number of identifiable public parks. And so they'd be permanent installations, but again, provided that it wasn't working, we could reassess and reevaluate, hopefully maybe repurpose those materials to a certain extent at least. But ultimately they're intended to be permanent installations.
But the idea being, if an artist puts something on it, it's there, it's done. Or
It's
is
there
it
until someone
the-
comes back and sprays it again.
Yeah, okay. I see a challenge with that. I did a project many years ago with Circle K. And if you look at the Circle K buildings in town, there was a graffiti project, in fact, and we had a professional artist come in and teach kids and all these things. It was absolutely fantastic. And if you look at those, I think it's been, I don't know, 10 years maybe. Maybe I'm not that old, I don't know. They haven't been touched. Nobody is painting over them because the unwritten rule is you don't paint over another person's work. So I mean, I don't know how successful it'll be if you give someone a blank canvas. They're gonna paint on it, of course. But the idea is you shouldn't paint over someone else's work because they already did it, right? So I mean, I heard discussion about, you know, partnering with private businesses. That project with Max Circle K was funded through Harvard University. That was fantastic. It was an amazing partnership, and they've stood the test of time. Those things have not been tagged since they were put up. So I don't know, is it a bigger project that we partner with private building owners to say, hey, do you want something on your building, and we can put it there professionally, or I'm not sure.
I think I tend to agree with you with when there's a public art installation intended to be permanent that doesn't get touched as often, or quickly, I think it's, you know, a handful of people who don't know the rules more or less. But I think the point of these graffiti boards is that there aren't any rules and that you're encouraged to work alongside. So if someone were to put up an image, somebody else could work their artwork into it as well. Ultimately, it would get painted over time. Like you will see layers and layers here, but I think that's part of why it's successful. Again, just a never-ending opportunity for people to create and display.
Right. So like once a week, would we come in and blank it out and make it white?
No, I'd say a couple of times a year, to be honest. And depending on the rates of use too, might change from location to location. Like I said, in the summer when graffiti tends to be at its highest, and again, like that's where people find themselves outside creating art, if they're going to create it outside. I was going to say that I would say that we have students that could be helpful in this as part of city staff.
Right, okay. I would personally rather see a completed project, like something that someone came in and did something really nice and it was done and it looks fantastic, than a mix mash that kind of just looks like everybody spray painted over each other's work. But I get the intent might be different here.
Anything further, Sunny? Okay. So I understand it's not a lot of money, and I appreciate the need to address the situation. I'm very confused as to why this is being proposed without having met with and gotten recommendations from the committee that was formed to provide advice on this type of thing. I have a question here, you know, is should MIAC be involved in this as part of that? I don't know if there's any youth folk on, if there are any youth on the graffiti committee. I'm not sure who makes up the membership of that, but you know, to me, we should be talking about a solution like that. It's definitely a problem. I just feel like it's a stopgap measure as opposed to like a concrete plan that has, and then I'm gonna ask you this question. You mentioned at the beginning, measurement of success. You said, oh, I know, I wrote that. You said that it's been successful. And when you were referring to, or when the Hamilton project and perhaps this other one in Grimsby was being referred to. And so my question is there a measurement of success? Like, what does this mean? Did the community see a reduction of X% in graffiti after they, like, what does success mean out from this investment?
I mean, from a perspective of research, I don't think we're gonna have stats on the percentage as to what the reduction is. But ultimately the articles indicated there was a reduction in the amount of unlawful tagging, we'll say.
Okay, so is there an opportunity to speak to the folks in charge at Hamilton? Like, I think the Hamilton idea is very cool. Just it's bigger, it's got a little more impact, but whatever it might be, like, because you know, what does that mean? Is it a little bit of reduction? You've got the idea that Sunny was just talking about, I mean, it's a bit distressing for me to have a group of folks that have been asked to provide advice who weren't consulted. I know it's only $5,000, so I'm not really sure what to say here. I'm gonna, Sean,
I was just gonna say, should we just move to defer this until that
Sure.
committee meets? And then we can receive a recommendation from them.
I think there's a timeliness to this, but you know, I don't know what the plan is for the committee to meet. Is there a plan for the committee to meet? Is it?
There's a plan. We don't have a date scheduled as of right
Okay.
now, but we do have a plan to meet, yes.
Okay, I don't wanna be unreasonable, I just. These are the things that are in my head. So Miranda did say that she was in favor of this. Miranda?
In light of the conversation we've had too, I'm supportive of this idea. I also feel like until we have a plan that lays out how we're using this fund, it feels weird to me to be approving anything paid for by this fund. And I know that other members have said similarly. So I do like this project, but I feel like we need a plan to be able to underpin and justify decisions around what we fund.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm happy with that. I just wanna check in with Virginia, make sure that if there's a cap, that we're not going to exceed it anytime soon.
I'll have to double check that with finance. We do have this year's allocation coming as well. Sorry, I missed the first little bit. So, was the discussion around forming a public art master plan? Is that what the plan is that's being referenced? Or what was the thought? I apologize that I missed
Yeah,
that.
I'll answer that question. This related to the first request for the $27,000 for the bus wrap, and I expressed certainly, as did others, that we have a significant amount of money, and if you add next year's money into it, it's even more significant. It's around $170,000. You know, that's a lot of money to have to really make an impact on the lack of public art here. And we just don't have a plan. And we've been talking about having a public art plan for a number of years. I know Virginia will say this, talked about it for a long time, and we just never acted on it. And I feel very strongly, I'm just one person at this table, but I feel very strongly that to make these types of decisions, especially the larger dollar value ones, in absence of a bigger plan that could create a better opportunity, that could actually impact tourism and economic growth, which is what we're supposed to be doing with public art, is the road we should be going down. So I don't want to, I'm not suggesting that we make things take too long or drag it on or whatever, but let's make a plan, and then because we make a plan, what is that term? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That, it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. So
Yes, that encapsulated the discussion, Virginia.
okay, thank you. No, I appreciate that. So just with that in mind, then, you know, we did start mapping out all the sites. We did kind of put on a bit of a hold. The person who was assisting with all the mapping went on maternity leave, and then the focus has been on the requirement to meet the province's asset management requirements for parks and recreation infrastructure. So that staff resource has had to focus on that because there's been requirements and timelines and deadlines set by the province in order to meet that. So I guess resources is always going to be a bit of a challenge. So then does the committee see allocating funds from that public art pot to support securing resources to have somebody come and write a public art master plan?
That should be discussed, but we're not going to be able to talk about that today.
Yeah,
But
no, I'm just,
that should be talked about, right?
yeah, so I just wanted to get a temperature on that before, you know, because we would need to start to see, you know, what does that cost, get some ballpark prices from companies that would do this type of work in order to be able to come back to the committee. If that's not something the committee's interested in proceeding with, then we wouldn't obviously start to do that outreach and try to get an idea on what that costing is, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's that plan, but then there's also the update of the whole cultural vitality plan. Like, there's a lot of plans that we know that one's now completely out of date. There's thinking that has to go into this. There's a new waterfront master plan development that's happening. We know that other entities are making plans to change. You know, I don't know what's happening at the art gallery these days. There's just a lot, and we should be rowing the boat or rowing them parallel and making, in my opinion, making investments that are gonna have the impact that we're looking for. As a community, both for our residents and for growth and tourism visitation. Sean?
Does the committee need volunteers to step forward from the committee to look at public art plans? To at least figure out if we need to do a sourcing of that, but also to identify what are the key questions we need answered, and are those things that we need outside help with, or is it something that we can mobilize the committee to do? So the base of that question is, do you need volunteers to figure that out?
So the question that I would ask is, I throw that back to Alicia and Virginia and say, like, functionally or procedurally or whatever, what would you like to see happen? I think there's, Sean is, I don't think he's brought this question up without offering to volunteer himself. And he didn't bring that up without, wanting, I would certainly be interested in helping, to be thinking ahead. I don't know about other people, obviously, so how do we best drive this forward? So as to not drag things along and have some impact.
I think the best way to start then is to develop a task force to discuss what you had just proposed about, again, the beginning, the preliminary research required, whether or not we should be pursuing this as a paid plan, or if we are capable ourselves. So I don't know, do we need a resolution for that, Virginia? At this point, I'm not sure. And you are mute.
If we're going to strike a subcommittee, then yes, we need a resolution. I don't know, I had shared, I think, previously with the committee prior to the staff person going on maternity leave, some of the work that had been done where we were mapping the public art pieces, so maps of different spots of the town, and then the public art pieces overlaid in it within those maps. And we had previously went through what it was that other master plans had used. So we looked at Halton Hills, Hamilton, some other public art master plans, and then cross-referenced the key components of their plan with the documentation that we had through some of the pieces that we had already created, whether it was, the public, like our public art collections that we have already cataloged, the items. We've got the public art policy. So a lot of the components that were in the master plans were pieces that we had already created in the public art policy. The piece that was missing was the mapping, which was, we started down the road of doing a lot of the mapping. It's just the maps aren't finished, which became a resource challenge. And then identifying which locations we wanted to look at putting art in, and what size and scale and type of art could go within those spaces. So that was really our next steps that we needed to kind of get to, as from a mapping standpoint. And then from there, we would obviously be doing some community consultation to understand the types of art. But it's also, looking at what those spaces were that were potentially available for installations, if we were doing 3D, if there was walls, all of that, right? So a lot of it had to do with that mapping piece, and then the community consultation pieces, which were kind of the next phases. But a chunk of that work has been done, similar to other municipalities.
Sean?
Yeah, thank you for the reminder, Virginia, and I remember you going through a lot of that, and first of all, just apologies that I didn't have that front of mind, because you guys have actually done a ton of the work that I was initially thinking we might have to do. So I think we're in really good shape. It doesn't feel like that today, but I think we're in really good shape for being able to move forward. But you probably want some help.
I think a task force versus a subcommittee though, yes?
Depends on the composition, right? So depending on the number of committee members that are contributing, it could take the shape of it just depends on a subcommittee, right? Whether it's a subcommittee or a working group. But I do think, go ahead, Donna, sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, so as not to belabor this, maybe you and Alicia could discuss. Sean has said he'd be willing to help. I would certainly be willing to help. I'm not sure what other folks would be willing to do in terms of but whatever structure can work the best with the resources that we have available, and let's see how we can not belabor the system, but try and move it ahead in a way. Does that make sense? Is there anyone else who is interested in at this point, we're talking about a smaller group of people potentially getting together and discussing how to move ahead from where we left off last in this effort that we had undertaken to do a public art plan. So there's me, there's Sean, Nyla, are you offering to help? Okay. So
I love a
can
plan.
we leave that with the two of you to say, based on that, whatever the best way, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, based on that composition, it would end up being a subcommittee. Just because from a staffing standpoint, it would probably be Alicia and I. So yeah, I think, we could probably pass that resolution. Otherwise, we're gonna wait another month to get this kicked off.
Okay,
You know what I mean? Because we'd have to wait till the next meeting then,
Right.
to make that decision. So,
okay. So can I
and
then,
now, sorry, and so I was just gonna say, Donna, now may also be a good time to get some assistance with the maps. I'm hoping that they have a GIS student upstairs that can maybe take over some of the work that was being done by the previous staff person before.
okay. So I'm gonna whip a quick resolution on my brain. I need, be it resolved that a subcommittee is formed to discuss the follow through on a completion of a public art plan for the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And it would be comprised of Nyla, Donna, Sean, Alicia, and Virginia as staff members. Does that cover it? Okay. Could I have someone to move and to second? Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Miranda. All right, any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of that resolution, that is carried. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to.
Everybody ready for number 3?
Then they're ready for number 3. So this is another public art proposal funding request for the Sioux Market, Alicia.
Okay, this one is different.
Okay,
I think that we can probably agree that some of the same tenets of conversation apply to this that we just had. Moving forward, so this is in support of a mural to be installed on the Sioux Market building. For reference, the south facing wall, which is bordering the Tim Hortons drive-through, Braden's drove by. Yep, drives by. So in the document that's been circulated, if it's an arts and culture music festival, it's looking to include and highlight local, regional, and honestly out of town visual artists in particular, musicians and bringing together musicians, community members for workshop, for learning, for opportunities to experience culture. It's planned during Culture Days this year. It will be taking place September 19th, 20th, and potentially the 21st, provided that we receive some more funding that we're contingent on. Ultimately, the mural installation is planned to take place between September 8th and 20th. This year, we are projecting up to 4 permanently installed murals, but public art murals. So why this building? The Sioux Market is a local registered not-for-profit that benefits the art community through the continuous support of artisans, community grounded groups, and organizations, businesses, and entrepreneurs. Ultimately, it is a city-owned building with tenants that enhance tourism, community programming, and elevates artists, artisans, and entrepreneurs. I already said. I provided a quick budget breakdown. This is typically how much it costs to install a mural at just about any location. There's some variation depending on what's required, whether the person happens to be somebody who's a regional or local artist, so to speak, and how high the wall is up. Those are the 2 largest variations in breakdown. But right now within the Vivid structure, we pay $6,000 with HST for artist fees. Typically $1,000 is allotted for wall preparation before the paint, for the artist paint is applied to it. Typically it can cost up to $2,500 for the rental of a lift, if the building requires that. Depending on the artist, where they're coming from and what have you, is $1,000 for travel and hospitality honoraria. $2,000 to $3,000 for paint and additional supplies required by the artist. Again, it depends on whether it's spray paint or if it's a bucket base paint. And $1,000 to $2,000 for accommodations. That's on the lighter end, if I'm being honest. Knowing that we do this now at the height of the season, it's about $300 a night, and sometimes it takes up to 10 days to do these sorts of applications, installations. So the project max for each mural is about $15,500. Projected for this location is about $13,500. And we have the Sioux Market that have committed to pay to provide $7,500 in support of this project with your support as well. What I'm asking for today is $6,000 to offset the costs. And I want to let you know that we currently raised $50,500 for this festival, and we've got another $15,000 pending we're waiting to see, and I don't have that confirmed for this week, but that's where we're hoping to head. Again, 4 large scale public art installations this year, which is a lot. But and then this is what we're thinking, so I'm open to questions.
Okay, questions? Nyla?
Sorry, I forgot about questions. I was just gonna move into comments, so I'm gonna just
That's fine, go
sorry
ahead.
about that.
We'll go
Or
around the
comments?
table again, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say, I know we already touched on some things will be similar to the past ones. I think the difference here for me looking at this, obviously, there's like a time component to it. We know this like is an event going forward, and the difference between the other 2 proposals being that Sioux Market has already contributed and they're looking for us to partner with them. And so I guess my only comment is that even in regards to all the discussions we've had about the plan and then the other 2 agenda items, I would be in favor of approving this, considering just the differences in timing in the event structure and the fact that there's already a partner who's looking for just to close that gap to do this. Like I guess it'd be like the 4th art installation. That was my comment about the agenda item.
Thank you. Miranda, you got anything, questions or comments?
I'm curious to hear from the rest of the committee on this one.
Okay, Sunny? You're in favor of this? Am I understanding that from your thumbs up? You're in favor of this, a contribution, Sean?
Yeah, again, this is a tricky one. It's similar to last one. It's like I support these ideas. I'm not super comfortable with the fact that we don't have a mechanism for this, right? But I also take Nyla's point, both the time limited element plus combined with the fact that we have a partner, combined with the fact that it's also something that we have done consistently in terms of the support for the murals that have been tied to this festival. I would vote for it. I mean, if we were voting on scales of 1 to 5, it might be a 3, but just because of those other contextual pieces where I hate to say yes to one and no to these others, right?
If it makes you feel better, something I could mention is this was part of the initiative of the community art project that was part of a plan that has kind of landed on us a little bit with the dissolution of the Downtown Association. As we move forward, there will be a larger component of public art, I think, that takes place through this festival now and in the future, as we absorb the agreements with the property owners, with the city for maintenance and what have you. So this is, again, a strategy that can be reviewed, certainly, and refined, but it is part of a larger project that is already in motion.
It doesn't.
Okay, great.
Okay, I have a question. And then we're gonna go back to Miranda. I'm confused about the 50,500 that you mentioned, an additional 1580. Like, what does that get used for? Does that pay for the additional 4 public art murals? Or and this is a separate, this is 5 over and above, or is this one of the 4? Like, I'm a little confused now.
Sure, no problem. So I didn't provide the budget because they haven't reviewed it at the committee level with the group as we move forward. So I didn't feel comfortable sharing it here this way today. We currently have $50,000 in carryover and sponsorship confirmed for the season.
Okay,
So that's where that money comes from. Ultimately, the plan is for 4 public art murals, a concert, a cultural market and performances on the Saturday, and potentially with that $15,000, say a film festival, it's planned for the Sunday as well. So we have a series of different pieces that need to be funded. We have performers to pay,
Yeah.
to rent.
I think I was just trying to understand if the 4 murals, the 4 public murals that are paid for within this money that's raised to support the entire Vivid Festival over the weekend. Though this is a 5th mural. This is the 4th mural. So why then, if I may ask, why is the decision to not, if 3 murals are being covered out of these funds that have been raised, why not 4? Like, where does this request stem from?
For me personally, we don't own any of the murals that have been installed, but for the example of, I think it's Thomas Sinclair. Whose mural is on the side of it's a building next to the Ermitanger. I think that's the only one that's on a city property. Technically speaking, the student market is a city-owned property. So we are the partner. In past, different organizations, different tenants, different building and property owners have provided in-kind service, expenses, cash.
Okay,
So that's where
so the other 3 murals are on public or private, sorry, they are on private property.
Yes,
But there isn't money in the budget, the Vivid budget, to pay for the over and above the money that has been raised. I'm assuming that has come from the Sioux Market organization. Just wanna make sure I grasp this.
I would say that's accurate.
Okay, Miranda,
What Sean offered summarized the concerns that I have. And like mostly just around not having like a spending policy to apply evenly to things. And yeah, I have nothing else to add right now. I'm just sort of pondering that.
okay, so circling back here now, just watching the time. So Nyla is in favor, Sunny is in favor. Sean, I believe, said he was in favor. In which case that will pass, whether you or I agree or not, Miranda. But for the record, I will agree. I'm a 3. I'm with Sean on the 3, but I will agree. And Miranda, for the record, you can approve or disapprove, however you feel comfortable.
I'll agree with that.
Okay. All right, so that is approved.
I think we have to resolve to recommend it to council. This will go to city council for release.
All right, so,
It's not on this printout, I'm sorry, so it's item 5.3 officially.
all right, so then, there's a motion, be it resolved that the request for $6,000 from the Public Art Fund for the Sioux Market Public Art proposal be recommended to City Council by the Cultural Vitality Committee. If I said that right, I need to move her in a seconder for that. Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Sunny. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much. All right, we are now going to move into closed session with regards to the Community Recognition Award. So Alicia is going to stop streaming.
If it's okay here, I'll read the resolution.
I can do it. I'll do it. No worries. Sorry, I forgot about that part. So, be it resolved that the Cultural Vitality Committee proceed into closed session to debate the merits of the applications of nominees of the Community Recognition Award, and further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the committee may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution, which relate to personal matters about an identifiable individual, section 239, 3B of the Municipal Act. Could I have someone to move and to second that resolution? Thank you, Nyla. Thank you, Sean. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. We'll now move into closed session.
Great, and so before we start talking about this, I'm going to end this session. I'm going to close our Zoom windows. I'm gonna ask that you rejoin, but give it a solid minute, please, to make sure that we're off the stream and that we're not streaming this part live.